right, hello, this is Donna Gority for ArtsAltoona Live, and we are here very pleased to be interviewing David Freemont McCready, who is a Renaissance man in Blair County, little known to many of us. So I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to meet him and to have you meet him through our interview here. So David, you first came to the attention of ArtsAltoona with a poem that you had written. So tell us a little bit about your poetry, how you got into it, and why you specifically chose a certain poem to share with us.
Well, that is an interesting concept. I'm a Renaissance man. I know that age has created the obvious. I've been around a while. And I think the poem Red is something that hit me very, very close to my heart, because Red is about a dog. It's about an Irish setter, of course.
Makes sense.
And in my early years at Juniata Gap, we had an Irish setter that we inherited from a fellow who was in Vietnam. And he was killed there, and I ended up with his dog. And then later on, there was another Irish setter that my father had, and I know the animal very well. They have a peculiar, especially in the male version of the Irish setter, they are tough to control. They have a mind of their own like no other dog. Well, anyway, the poem Red came from my daughter's friend's father, who had one of those dogs, and in a 3-minute conversation with me about 5 years ago, or 10 years ago, I learned about his dog, Red. And the poem is, of course, about his dog. Okay. And that was the stimulus for the poem. Now, it's a long poem, and it's semi-epic. Okay. And epic poems are some of my favorites. But then I do like some of those short line poems, like Robert Frost. One of his famous pieces is, "Whose woods are these? I think I know." If you all have read any of Robert Frost, you'll understand what I mean, because he has this little sleigh that's coming up. He is the master of touching your heart. Okay. Then, of course, there are epic poems that from the Brownings, and I like to see that poems kind of take reality and condense it in a way that means so much, even phrase after phrase. Like Robert Browning wrote My Last Duchess, and it's a story about an English gentleman in the Victorian era, which is about mid-1800s, and he took this image of a woman's picture on the wall, and he said, "That's my last Duchess," and he laments the fact that he's getting married again. And the poem is just, it's a revelation on condensing a man's life, transition from one wife to another. Okay. And I also look at poems like Keats, for instance. He'll take an inanimate object. Otto Grecian urn, for example, is a good example for me, because he takes the images on this Grecian urn and he translates those into a situation where he relates to it on a daily basis. So poems have a way of reaching deep within you. Okay. And I did not start out to write a book of poems. I just started writing poems, and the poem Red is only one of maybe, I don't know, I've some published, maybe over 100. Wow. But I have
written many more than that.
Somebody said to me, "I want you to write a poem about," I said, "Stop." I don't write a poem about something unless that something has touched me.
Speaks to you. All right.
So maybe I'm going a little too deep here with the interview and what you want to ask me, but I've taken the poetic
poetic license.
One, of course, is and I have this great interest in wristwatches and design.
Right, we'll get there.
And the one in particular is the Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner.
Okay.
And I wrote, no, I didn't write, but I designed a series of watches
Right.
based upon that poem.
Right. So I also discovered that you have written at least one book, and you told me earlier two. The one I discovered was Tales My Dog Told Me, I believe was the title. So tell me about a little bit about that dog and how he has spoken to you.
I'd like to pick up a copy of that.
Okay.
All right.
Scoot off screen for a second.
This happens to be the proof copy, which they send you before they do the, and you'll look at a picture of, that is a picture of a rendition of my dog, and here's a better picture of him here. And this particular dog I found when we lived in Arizona, and his name is 80. That's a number. And he was...
Technically 89, if I recall.
Yeah, well, there is
There's a
famous,
story to that.
famous highway that goes
Right.
through Wickenburg, Arizona, directly to the Grand Canyon, and he was found on Route 89. Well, over time, we shortened it to 80.
That's
It's
his
easier to
nickname.
say.
Okay.
And then, of course, it's down to 8 when he's doing something wrong. 8. So, the story about 80 is in this book. So what I've used is, in the beginning, I mentioned that, oh, here I am, now I'm going to have to change. And, oh, this, whoops, stop the camera. Anyway, I begin the story of 80 by the first person, 80, talking. Of course, he can't talk, but it says, I was found on the evening of Friday, October 21st, 2005, abandoned on a lower part of Route 89 south of Yarnell, Arizona. And then I go on, and he discusses how he was found, and then he begins to tell the stories of the things that I've done in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So
Very interesting.
That's it. I won't try to read anymore. So I find that those stories go clear back to when I started doing things as a kid, and I liked dogs. In fact, they were basically my brothers and sisters. We lived in kind of a remote area at the time, which was Juniata Gap. That's north of the Altoona campus there.
Mm-hmm.
And dogs were an important part of my life, and I understand them well.
Mm.
What's the next question you want to ask?
Well, I do want to get to the watches.
Okay.
You have been collecting watches for a very long time. At what point did you start designing watches and your inspiration? We talked earlier about the Ancient Mariner. As I was doing research online, each of your different watches has a beautiful symbolism behind it about why you chose to develop it the way that you did. So I guess begin at the beginning. How long have you been into watches?
Well, I've been into watches since I was 13.
Okay.
As just a little side note, a young fellow whose father was in the watch business came to our community looking for a family who had moved in. And of course, that one girl was his girlfriend, and they essentially been married, and that's all. But he used to stop at my house first because he was interested in electronics, and my father was considered an electronics expert.
Ah, even back then.
That's right. But anyway, as that time went on, I was always the go-between. He would say, "Davy, go tell Josephine I'm down here." So I did, and that all round up, and I found out. I got a little help from him and interest in watches, and that's, of course, the history. Now, I began to collect watches just because I liked them. I had literally 1,000 watches collected.
Wow.
And the Altoona School District bought our properties up in Juniata Gap.
Oh, okay.
And here I have all this stuff.
Uh-huh.
my wife said, what are you going to do with all
All
that,
that stuff,
to move?
uh-huh.
Now we're going to have to move. Well, my daughter, who she's been involved in the internet, she said, why don't you start putting them on the internet and sell them?
Mm-hmm.
I did, and believe me, I sold them very quickly. Almost all of them, all except some of the favorite ones, which are in this case back
which
here.
you held on to, right.
So now we ran out of watches to sell, and I thought, I think I could make watches. So I decided that I needed to link up in Switzerland.
Okay.
And I did, and I was very
Switzerland
quickly,
is certainly known for its fine
That's
watch
right, that's-
machinery.
they are still the
State of
leader.
the art. Okay.
and they got their lead from the Americans.
Hmm.
The great American watches were Hamilton, Elgin, and those particular watches were the way that the Swiss kind of played like the Asians have played stealing or
Adopted it and refined it
that's right.
to an
So,
art.
Anyway, I started putting them together, and it was nobody else had done that. Now, I wanted to place a name on this watch that was
Meaningful to you.
meaningful to me. And
Sure.
of course, my middle name is Fremont,
Okay.
and it should have been spelled with one E and not two. But
Okay.
the local courthouse, when they registered my birth certificate, added an extra E to it.
Ah, okay.
I don't know whether you could go back and do anything about that. That was a long time ago. That was 1936.
Right.
So I used that name, and I liked it, and I created a logo for it. Of course, that had been my business before the watches became a business. I was a technical writer, and I was developing products for industry.
Oh, okay.
So I like the name D. Fremont because it's my step-grandfather's first name, and he was the only grandfather I really knew
Okay.
because the other ones had passed away before I was,
Right, right.
so and that's why I kind of honored him.
So
He
you use a
was nice
small
man.
D with a small F and push together with
Right.
the same stem, essentially.
Right.
And I noticed that on some of your watch covers or faces, you put that in the place of a number 7. Is there a reason for that?
Have you
I
ever
have a
heard-
feeling there's a reason for everything
Oh,
you
yeah.
do.
Well, you ever heard of Shemitah?
No?
That's a Jewish term
Okay.
for 7 days you have in a week.
Okay.
The 7th day you rest.
Okay.
Every 7 years there is a change in things. You forgive all your debtors. It goes to the Old Testament.
Okay.
And that's where that comes from. It's God's number.
Okay.
And you'll find that I have I've tried to weave that concept into a lot of things that I do. And by the way, poetry is something that I really enjoy writing, but I have been dedicating myself to essays recently, and I have a booklet of, it's going to be a booklet, it can't be that many, a booklet on essays that I think are relevant to today's problems. And my most recent essay is Rumble on Walton's Mountain. And if you've ever seen the TV program, The Waltons,
Okay.
now you have to be my age bracket more or less to understand that. Young people won't know that. Walton's Mountain was a story of a Southern family in the Depression. And I have used that as a backdrop for some of the problems that have taken place recently in Charlottesville. Now, you're going to have me dig in deep in my political affiliations, which I don't want to do.
We don't need to go there.
No, but we have to look at history from 2 positions. One is that after the Civil War, the South had been decimated of its universities, its libraries, and a lot of the history that we are taught in today's schools were revisionist histories created in the Great Northeast. And I blink my eyes when I say that. And I have some problems with academia of that. Anyway, I won't get into that. As I say.
Understood. Right.
So I think essays are a better way for me to go and write about something, and something that I think about. And I've never been a fiction enthusiast. I've always had a reason to say, well, I really don't appreciate some of the things that come out, and I just don't appreciate it. Well, anyway, the essay is a good way for me to bring out some of my my real thoughts, deep thoughts.
Philosophies, right.
So why did I publish a book? I did it for my kids.
Okay.
More than anything else is the stories my dog told me, that was for my kids. I have 3 daughters. I have Barb, Monica, and Susie. And I think they need to have that reference. I have 3 grandsons.
Terrific.
Fine grandsons. And I notice how each of those have been manipulated. I hate to use that term, but yet it's relevant. There's manipulation in the educational system, and I think they, for whatever purposes in coming down the line to us, I think they see things differently than I did, and I do, and as a result, I want them to know where I came from.
Right, right. So important.
Yeah.
So important.
Well,
so back to the watches.
Yeah.
You design them. Do you also actually build them, or?
Well, let's look at how that's done.
Okay.
In order to have a Swiss watch, it has to be assembled in Switzerland.
Okay.
Now, you have to choose, having had all this experience with these old watches, so the point is you have to choose an engine or the movement of the watch that is, in other words, it's got to be a good one. It can't be something that's, and believe me, if it's made in Switzerland and survives, it's good. I don't care who makes it. But I use watch movements from the Swatch group, and that is the #1 manufacturer of wristwatch movements in Switzerland. There is the basis for the watch. Now you buy that, you have to look the watch over and measure it. Of course, my technical background, that's part of what I've done. And by the way, I wanted to put a plug in for the Altoona campus.
Okay.
I went there for 2 years, and of course, then later on, it was 2 years. Then,
Right,
and I
right.
eventually graduated from Lycoming College in Williamsport.
Oh, okay.
But there, I got a good head start, not only with literature, and that was Emil Fernier. Since I haven't been able to find who he is anymore, I guess he's lost to history. And many of the people there were influenced the way I think about doing things the right way. So the design of the case then would be in my hands. I would draw it out on. Of course, I had to do it with that. I didn't have computer aided design at that time. So I would draw those things out, and then I would fabricate I wouldn't fabricate it, but I'd have them fabricate the case to put the movement. Then we'd go to a dowel manufacturer and draw what the dowels to look like, and then choose hands that were made by those people over there. They put it all together in a package. So that's how that comes about.
Terrific, terrific.
Now, there is something happening in this country that is really important. There's one watch manufacturer in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, who's young enough to start and do it from the bottom up. His name is Roland Murphy, and everybody should recognize that this is, he's a notable support of the wristwatch industry. This fellow his watches are very expensive, but he makes them all here. He's doing a good job with that. I would love to have done that myself, but I started in retirement.
Right, right, okay.
He started when he was still a young man.
Terrific.
Well,
I know also on some of the watch faces there's a bird. What's the bird, and where did that concept come from
that's
for
interesting
you?
too. I'm glad you asked.
Okay.
There's a story by the Ryman, the Ancient Mariner, Coleridge, and it's a story about a ship in the early 17th to late 17th century, around 1800, that takes off from perhaps the area of Florida, and it goes down under the equator And on the way down, all of these things that human nature tends to bring out either the best and the worst in people takes place. And in this poem, this one individual on the ship, we call him the Ancient Mariner, he and his companions decide that this albatross, that's the bird, that's following the ship, is either a good or bad omen. Now, as you go down the South Atlantic, the first reaction is this is a bad omen because the sea is green, and I use that color in the watch. And it's also at night. There's an eerie glow from the moon, and I use the luminous material that's normally on the hands of a watch as the backdrop.
Oh,
of the
wow.
dial.
Okay.
I don't think many people have, no one had done that yet, but some people are doing it now. And then as it gets rougher, the Ancient Mariner takes a crossbow and he shoots the albatross, and it falls to the deck of the ship. Now they go around the horn, rough water, and they start up the other side, and they say, oh, well, it's a good thing they killed that albatross because, look, things are getting better now.
Oh, wow.
So the dead albatross is still on the deck. And guess what happens? They get on up near the Galapagos Islands, and they get in a dead calm. Everything stops. No water, no food. Everybody dies except the Ancient Mariner. But before he dies, they hung the albatross around his neck and said, you shouldn't have shot him. We shouldn't have shot him.
There's a phrase about that, isn't there? With an albatross around your neck?
That's right. Well, it goes along with it. He looks out across the water and he says, water, water everywhere, and not a drop to drink.
Right, I've heard that phrase as well.
Okay, in the back of my watches, I put, because they are kind of waterproof, water, water everywhere, not a drop to leak.
To leak.
So, the end of the poem is that he is rescued either by God or by angels who drift him into the Panama Canal area. And each of our watches, this in the series, have a coordinate, latitude and longitude coordinate. That's the number of the watch.
Right.
So they spirit him off, and he's there as the poem began, where he's telling people to be kind to man and bird and beast alike. It's a good poem.
I very much want to thank you for this. Are there anything else as we're wrapping up that you would like to share with us?
Well, no.
Related to the arts or related to your life? This is absolutely fascinating to me.
Well, I'll abandon my dabbling in art because I don't want you to, because I do fool around with that, but only as something I like to do. No, I think I like to write more than anything.
Well, that's certainly an art, and you do it very artistically. I know that just the descriptions of your watches and the thought behind them, I think is absolutely fascinating. So I encourage anybody to look them up online and, check out, as always, our Facebook page, our website, calendar of events, and please like and share all of the things that we do for ArtsAltoona, getting the word out. So, final words, David?
Well, there's one of my poems there that I think you would appreciate. And it says, I believe in mistakes. They are the meat of great invention and adventure. You think about that.
Excellent, excellent. All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.